What if I told you that right now there's an animal out there that literally shoots blood from its eyes as a defense mechanism, or a creature that explodes its own internal organs just to survive another day? These aren't movie monsters or mythical beasts. They're real animals living on our planet right now, and their survival strategies are so extreme, so bizarre, that they sound absolutely impossible. But here's the twist. These incredible adaptations that should save their lives sometimes become the very thing that kills them. Today, we're diving into the world of nature's most extreme survivors, creatures whose bodies have evolved such radical defense mechanisms that they're walking a razor-thin line between genius and self-destruction. And trust me, what scientists have recently discovered about these animals will completely change how you see the natural world. Let's start with something that sounds like pure fiction, but happens every single autumn across North America and Europe. Picture this. You're a male deer during rutting season. Your testosterone levels have skyrocketed to nearly 10 times their normal levels. Your neck has swollen to twice its usual size, packed with muscle. Those antlers on your head, they can weigh up to 40 pounds and span 6 feet across. You're pumped, aggressive, and completely focused on one thing: winning the right to mate. But here's where evolution plays a cruel trick. Those magnificent antlers, the very weapons nature gave you to compete, can become a death sentence. Recent research from wildlife biologists in 2025 has documented over 300 cases annually where male deer become permanently locked together during fights. When two bucks clash, their antlers interlock like puzzle pieces, and sometimes the geometry just doesn't allow them to separate. What happens next is tragic. These animals, pumped full of adrenaline and aggression, panic. They thrash, they pull, they twist, and in their desperation, they often stumble into rivers, lakes, or marshes. Once in the water, those 40-pound antlers become anchors. Both animals drown, still locked together in their final battle. But scientists have discovered something even more disturbing. Studies using GPS collars on deer populations have revealed that even when bucks don't get locked together, the sheer energy expenditure during rutting season kills approximately 15% of mature males. They literally run themselves to death. During the rut, male deer can lose up to 30% of their body weight in just 6 weeks. They stop eating, they barely sleep, and they fight constantly. Their immune systems crash, making them vulnerable to diseases and parasites. Researchers at the University of Montana published findings in early 2025 showing that many bucks who survive the rutting season die within weeks afterward, their bodies simply too depleted to recover before winter arrives. Nature gave them the tools to reproduce, but using those tools pushes their biology to the absolute breaking point. Now, before we go further, if you're enjoying these wild facts, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps more people discover just how bizarre and beautiful our natural world really is. And stick around, because what's coming next involves a lizard that turns itself into a biological weapon. Let's travel southwest to the deserts of Texas, Arizona, and Mexico, where one of the most misunderstood reptiles on Earth has been making headlines in the conservation world. The Texas horned lizard, affectionately called a horny toad, despite being neither horny nor a toad, has evolved one of the most extreme defense mechanisms in the animal kingdom. And recent research has revealed just how dangerous this defense is, not just to predators, but to the lizard itself. Here's how it works. When threatened by a coyote, fox, or other predator, this palm-sized lizard has several options. It can run, but it's not particularly fast. It can hide, but its spiky profile makes camouflage challenging, so it goes nuclear. The lizard restricts blood flow from its head, causing blood pressure in its cranial sinuses to build to extreme levels. Special muscles then rupture tiny blood vessels around its eyes, and the lizard shoots a stream of blood up to 5 feet away. This isn't just gross-out theater. The blood contains chemicals derived from the venomous harvester ants that make up 70% of the lizard's diet. These compounds taste absolutely foul to canine predators and can cause temporary nausea and disorientation. Scientists at Texas Christian University published groundbreaking research in 2025 using high-speed cameras and pressure sensors to measure exactly what happens during these blood-squirting events. What they found was shocking. The blood pressure in the lizard's head spikes to levels that would cause immediate stroke or aneurysm in most vertebrates. We're talking about pressures exceeding 300 millimeters of mercury, nearly triple what would be considered a hypertensive crisis in humans. The lizard's skull has special reinforced structures to handle this pressure, but it's not foolproof. The study found evidence that approximately 8% of blood-squirting events result in permanent damage to the lizard's eyes or brain. Some lizards were found dead with no external injuries, likely victims of catastrophic cranial hemorrhaging triggered by their own defense mechanism. But here's where the story gets even more concerning. Texas horned lizard populations have declined by over 65% in the last 50 years. The primary culprit isn't their dangerous defense mechanism, it's habitat loss and the widespread use of pesticides that have decimated harvester ant populations. Without their primary food source, these lizards are already stressed and malnourished. When they're forced to use their blood-squirting defense in this weakened state, the mortality rate from self-inflicted injuries jumps significantly. Conservation groups are now working to create protected corridors and restore native ant populations, but it's a race against time for this remarkable reptile. Most people have this completely wrong when it comes to the next animal on our list. When you hear the word shrew, you might picture a small mouse-like creature scurrying through the underbrush. Cute, right? Wrong. The shrew is one of nature's most extreme metabolic machines, an animal so finely tuned for survival that it's perpetually on the edge of death. Let me put this in perspective. The Etruscan shrew, the smallest mammal by weight on Earth, has a resting heart rate of over 1,200 beats per minute. That's 20 beats per second. A hummingbird in full flight hits about the same rate. But here's the difference. The hummingbird can land and rest. The shrew cannot. Its metabolism is so incredibly fast that it must consume between 80 and 90% of its body weight in food every single day. Miss a meal, and you're looking at death within hours. Recent metabolic studies published in the Journal of Experimental Biology in 2025 revealed something scientists didn't expect. Using thermal imaging and continuous monitoring of wild shrews, researchers discovered that these tiny mammals experience what they're calling micro-hibernation events. When food becomes scarce, a shrew's body temperature can drop by up to 10 degrees Celsius in just minutes, and its heart rate plummets to around 300 beats per minute. This emergency shutdown mode can extend survival time from 4 hours to nearly 12 hours without food. It sounds like a brilliant adaptation, right? But here's the catch. The process of rapidly cooling down and then warming back up puts enormous strain on the cardiovascular system. The researchers found that shrews who went through multiple micro-hibernation cycles had significantly shorter lifespans, often dying of heart failure months earlier than shrews with consistent food access. Think about that for a moment. Evolution gave shrews a survival mechanism to handle food scarcity, but using that mechanism repeatedly literally shortens their lives. The average shrew lives only 12 to 18 months in the wild, and scientists now believe that the metabolic flexibility that helps them survive day to day is also what prevents them from living longer. Their hearts, beating over 40 million times in a single year, simply wear out. But scientists didn't expect what they found next when studying shrew behavior. These tiny predators are also venomous. The short-tailed shrew produces a toxin in its saliva that can paralyze prey items much larger than itself. This venom contains a compound similar to the one found in some snake venoms, and it's potent enough to kill small rodents and even rabbits. The shrew will bite its prey, inject venom, and then cache the paralyzed animal for later consumption. It's like having a living refrigerator. But producing this venom requires significant metabolic resources, adding yet another energy demand to an already overworked system. The shrew is literally burning itself out from the inside just to stay alive. If you're learning something new, drop a comment below telling me which of these animals surprised you most. And make sure you're subscribed, because we're about to head underwater to meet a creature that takes self-defense to a level that's almost incomprehensible. Imagine you're in the deep ocean, cruising along the seafloor. You're a sea cucumber, which, despite the name, is actually an animal, not a vegetable. You're basically a tube-shaped blob of living tissue, filtering nutrients from the sediment. Life is slow, peaceful, and relatively safe, until it isn't. A hungry fish approaches, or maybe a crab looking for an easy meal. You have no shell, no speed, no venom, no teeth. What do? You explode. I'm not being dramatic. Sea cucumbers have evolved one of the most extreme defense mechanisms in the animal kingdom, a process called evisceration. When threatened, certain species of sea cucumber will violently contract their body muscles and expel their internal organs, including their digestive tract, respiratory structures, and sometimes even their gonads, through either their mouth or their anus. The expelled organs are sticky, stringy, and often toxic, creating a confusing, unappetizing mess that distracts or deters predators while the sea cucumber slowly inches away. Here's where it gets absolutely wild. Research published in Marine Biology in 2025 used advanced microscopy and genetic analysis to understand how sea cucumbers regenerate after evisceration. What scientists discovered is that the regeneration process involves the activation of stem cells throughout the animal's body, cells that essentially rebuild entire organ systems from scratch. This process can take anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months, depending on the species and environmental conditions. During this time, the sea cucumber cannot eat, cannot properly respire, and is incredibly vulnerable to infection and secondary predation. The study found that approximately 30% of sea cucumbers that undergo evisceration in the wild do not survive the regeneration period. They either starve because they lack a functional digestive system, suffocate because their respiratory structures haven't regrown properly, or fall victim to opportunistic predators who recognize a defenseless target. And here's the kicker. Some sea cucumber species can only eviscerate a limited number of times in their lifetime before their stem cell reserves are depleted. After that, Any serious threat becomes a death sentence because they've lost the ability to regenerate. But scientists have discovered something even more fascinating. Some species of sea cucumber have evolved what researchers are calling tactical evisceration. Instead of expelling all their organs, they selectively eject only certain structures, like specialized respiratory trees that contain higher concentrations of toxins. This partial evisceration requires less energy to regenerate and keeps essential digestive functions intact. It's like the difference between throwing your entire wallet at a mugger versus just handing over a few bills. Field observations in the Indo-Pacific region have shown that sea cucumbers capable of this selective evisceration have survival rates nearly 50% higher than species that go for the full nuclear option. The sea cucumber story gets even more interesting when you consider conservation. These animals are harvested extensively for Asian food markets, where they're considered a delicacy. Overfishing has caused population crashes in multiple species, and some countries have implemented sea cucumber farming operations. But here's the problem. Farmed sea cucumbers, raised in crowded conditions with limited genetic diversity, show significantly higher rates of spontaneous evisceration triggered by stress rather than actual threats. They're literally self-destructing in response to poor living conditions, making commercial farming economically challenging and raising serious animal welfare questions. Now let's leave the ocean and head to the remote forests of New Zealand, where one of the world's strangest and most critically endangered birds is making a comeback against impossible odds. Meet the kakapo, a bird so bizarre that when European naturalists first encountered it, they struggled to classify it. Is it a parrot? Yes. Can it fly? No. Is it nocturnal? Yes. Does it smell like flowers and honey? Absolutely. And that last trait might be its biggest problem. The kakapo is the world's heaviest parrot, with males weighing up to 9 pounds. They're also the only flightless parrot species and one of the longest-lived birds, with some individuals reaching over 90 years old. But despite these impressive stats, by 1995, only 51 kakapo remained on Earth. The species was functionally extinct, a victim of introduced predators like rats, stoats, and cats that New Zealand's native wildlife had never evolved to handle. Here's where the kakapo's biology becomes its own worst enemy. Unlike most birds, which rely on visual displays or songs to attract mates, male kakapo use scent. During breeding season, males produce a powerful, musky odor that can be detected by females from over half a mile away. They also create elaborate booming calls from bowl-shaped depressions. They dig in the ground, calls that can last all night and be heard up to 3 miles away. This strategy probably worked great when the only predators were native birds of prey that hunted by sight during the day. But introduced mammalian predators hunt by scent, and they're active at night. The kakapo's mating strategy essentially became a dinner bell for invasive species. But here's where the story gets even stranger. Kakapo only breed every 2 to 4 years, and only when certain native trees produce large fruit crops. This irregular breeding is tied to environmental conditions, and scientists believe it evolved as a strategy to avoid overwhelming the food supply. The problem is that with such a small population, missing even one breeding season could be catastrophic. And female kakapo only lay 2 to 3 eggs per breeding attempt, with chick survival rates historically around 50%. The New Zealand Department of Conservation has mounted one of the most intensive species recovery programs ever attempted. Every single living kakapo has a name, a radio transmitter, and a dedicated team monitoring its health and behavior. Scientists use artificial insemination, supplementary feeding, and intensive predator control on offshore islands to give every egg the best possible chance. And it's working. As of early 2025, the Kakapo population has reached an incredible milestone: 347 individuals. That's a nearly seven-fold increase from the lowest point. Recent genetic research published in 2025 has given conservationists new hope. By analyzing the genomes of all living Kakapo, scientists discovered that despite the population bottleneck, there's more genetic diversity than expected. Apparently, the 51 survivors represented individuals from multiple isolated populations that had diverged slightly over thousands of years. This genetic diversity means the species has a better chance of long-term survival than previously thought. Researchers are now using this genetic data to carefully manage breeding pairs, maximizing genetic diversity in each new generation. But the Kakapo's slow metabolism, which allows it to survive on relatively little food, also means it's incredibly efficient at storing fat. In captivity, with reliable food sources, Kakapo can become dangerously obese, developing fatty liver disease and other health problems. Conservationists have had to develop specialized diets and even exercise programs to keep these birds healthy. Imagine being so endangered that you have a personal trainer. That's the Kakapo's reality. The Kakapo story illustrates something crucial about conservation. Sometimes saving a species isn't about protecting vast wilderness areas. It's about understanding every tiny detail of an animal's biology and working with nature, not against it, to give that species a fighting chance. The intensive management required for Kakapo is expensive and labor-intensive, but it's proven that even species on the absolute brink can recover with enough dedication and scientific knowledge. So what have we learned from these incredible animals? Evolution is not a perfect process. It's a series of compromises, trade-offs, and sometimes outright contradictions. The deer's antlers that attract mates can also lock them into a fatal embrace. The horned lizard's blood-squirting defense can cause fatal brain hemorrhaging. The shrew's incredible metabolism that allows it to be a fierce predator also burns out its heart in months. The sea cucumber's ability to regenerate after evisceration is miraculous, but 30% don't survive the process. And the Kakapo's unique adaptations that allowed it to thrive in prehistoric New Zealand made it helpless against modern invasive species. But here's the beautiful part. Understanding these contradictions, these biological vulnerabilities, gives us the knowledge we need to protect these species. Conservation isn't about preserving nature in some pristine, untouched state. It's about understanding the complex, messy, sometimes self-destructive reality of how animals actually survive, and then using that knowledge to help them thrive in a rapidly changing world. The animals we've explored today are still here, still fighting, still evolving. The deer continue their ancient battles each autumn, but wildlife corridors and hunting regulations help maintain healthy populations. The Texas horned lizard is the focus of massive habitat restoration projects across the Southwest. Shrew populations serve as crucial indicators of ecosystem health, their extreme metabolism making them sensitive to environmental changes. Sea cucumber populations are being protected through fishing regulations and marine reserves. And the Kakapo, once down to 51 individuals, is slowly but surely coming back from the edge of extinction. These animals remind us that nature is not a Disney movie. It's brutal, weird, often contradictory, and absolutely fascinating. Every species on Earth is the result of millions of years of evolutionary trial and error. And sometimes those trials result in survival strategies that are as dangerous to the animal as they are effective against predators. But that's what makes them so worth studying, protecting, and celebrating. If this video taught you something new, if it made you see the natural world a little differently, then smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the bizarre, beautiful, and often unbelievable world of animal science. Drop a comment telling me which animal you want to learn about next, and I'll see you in the next video, where we explore even more incredible creatures that prove truth really is stranger than fiction.